Thank you all for coming. You all look great as usual. So good to see your faces. Let's jump right into Lillian. We think we learn about Lillian on this big long walk that ends up being 10.4 miles through Manhattan. And what did you think? Was the walk a good way to learn about her? Did you like that as a way that it was kind of structured? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it a lot as a framework. I think there have been other books that have had a framework, not necessarily a walk, but some scheme like that. That's sort of the outside framework that they come back to, but the main body of the work comes out through her walk.
Yeah, I thought it was a perfect vehicle for what she was doing.
Okay, the previous comment, you're on a call and I can't see who you are. You put your voices.
Oh, Leslie Robbins. Sorry, I'm computerless today.
Well, glad you could still join us. I thought that was you, but I didn't want to be wrong.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But glad the calling in option is working.
I really liked it. I thought it was an interesting way to tie everything together. I just thought it worked very well with her whole storyline.
But allowed her to go back and forth between present day, which I think was in the 80s, to, you know, her when she was first in New York, and then when she was a little bit older in New York. That walk allowed us to see different time frames. That's good.
That's true. That's a good way to move back and forth in time without just like some authors now just do every other chapter or something, but this gave a little bit of a way to tie it all together, the memories.
And think about the changes that had occurred in those years. Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that occurred to me when I started reading this book is, why does this woman have such a dopey name? And then I realized it really is the real name just about of the real woman. So I did my feeling. I thought, I guess I'll let her have that name.
Yeah. Yeah, so the woman it was based on was Margaret Fishback.
Glad it isn't yours.
Right? So Boxfish, Lillian Boxfish, almost as bad as Fishback. Maybe, I don't know which one is worse, but.
I liked the walking part. I think it allowed, there was a certain amount of tension that would build, because didn't you feel sometimes that maybe she was in an unsafe situation, but it never really worked out that way. So it was a way to have moderate amount of tension, but she could interact with these people. And I think you got a real insight into who she was by the way she simply interacted with these strangers she came across, by just involving them in conversation, diffusing a situation. I think it really, it didn't seem an artificial way to get to know her. We just followed her on a walk and observed how she interacted with the world. And then worried about her, because it was, after all, getting very dark and very late. And she herself had mentioned how really criminally negligent the streets had been, just not well cared for, and it was a different time. But I thought the walk did an outstanding job of what everybody else said, but as well as allowing you to see her.
Right. And can I just say that I really hate books that are totally internal dialogue. I get really, I lose focus. I just don't have the concentration anymore. And this was so much better for having her internal dialogue going on with all of the external stuff.
It's interesting to me that nothing really bad happened on her walk. I mean, she did have that last encounter, but all the people that she ran into, and even the strangers, were very nice. And I remember I've been in New York, I think twice, but with my husband, he had meetings there. but I remember thinking what nice people they were. And I'm from a little town in Ohio, and my original thought was, oh, these people are going to be rough, and they're going to be gruff. And everyone was so nice there. And so that was interesting to me, that the book was written that way, because if I had not been there, I would have thought that it was a little bit unrealistic.
When I was there, a lady walking in front of me, a guy came behind me on a bike and grabbed her purse with all of her money, her passport, fell, broke her shoulder, dragged her for, a distance she would not let go. Finally, she did. So I kept waiting for this to happen in the book.
You've just exploded my dream there, Sue.
The guy that was walking with me and his wife was a cop from Green Bay, and he tried to catch this guy. He cut out in front of traffic. The guy from Green Bay almost got hit by a car. The guy got away with everything.
Oh, that's terrible. Okay, on to the next question.
Dane's gonna have nightmares. Were there any stops she made or encounters she had that really stood out to you?
Oh yeah, the guy, the last one where they exchanged coats.
The coats.
And
Yeah.
one of the reasons why it stood out for me was that, and she mentions this, Tracy, I think you listened to it, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the audio book, there's a discussion between the author and the narrator, and the author has not heard the narrator's version yet, but they're talking about how your perception as you walk sometimes dictates what happens. And she just never had this perception of people as being intrinsically hurtful or bad, although she thought about it for a second that they might end up killing her, but she just was going to treat them like regular people. And I thought that was one of the themes of the book that had a tie to the current racial situation. That if you perceive people to be dangerous, they're going to be dangerous. And if you perceive them a different way, then they're just people. So that was one of the reasons why that really, I hung on that one. Plus it was near the end of the book.
I thought the one with the young man who was working in his parents' store was interesting, because that is still very relevant. I think, he's young and would like to live his own life, and he has dreams, but he feels that he feels like he needs to stay and help his parents, his immigrant parents.
Was that the one who recommended the flower for her
Yeah,
to
I
take as a
think so.
present?
Yeah,
PJ, his name was
I thought
Yeah, I
that was
thought
real,
that was
that
a-
was a sweet story. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a darling story.
Mhm.
I'm not sure who the phone call is.
I cracked up when she went into that bar and wasn't happy that there were TVs in the bar she used to frequent, and how she picked apart all the all the commercials that were on the TV. I thought that was just an amusing little stop there.
There are a lot of dumb commercials
Was.
on TV. Really,
Mhm.
not very many clever ones, I don't think.
No.
I kept wait. Did you keep waiting for her to run into the subway vigilante? I kept waiting for her to run
No, I never even thought about that.
into they made such a big deal about it at the beginning.
Yeah, it was kind of a hot topic with quite a few people that she met. And it seemed to really worry her son. I think that kind of made her son want her to move, escalating crime, and then the vigilante on top of it. But she didn't seem interested in leaving, did she?
Mhm.
Why do you think the crime didn't bother her,
Oh, gosh.
or as much, I should say?
I think because it's her neighborhood. I think, sometimes it's a gradual change, but she seemed comfortable in and out of her neighborhood. I think it was just part of the changing face of New York. And besides that, she's old enough that she just really didn't want to move. So it's a level of acceptance of, well, what are you going to do?
And what are the chances too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And probably maybe a more realistic approach. Someone on the outside hears about all the crime, and that's all they hear about.
Right.
You know, just like going to Chicago or something like that.
Chicago's a very friendly city.
I think she would have
Thanks.
talked him out of it. If she met him, I think she'd have talked him out of it.
Right.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd have to go back and look as you're all talking. I'm thinking about the fact that when I read, I'd like to go back and look at what year the Bonfire of the Vanities was published.
Mm.
Because and I think it was the mid 80s. When I read the Bonfire of the Vanities, which was an excellent book, what I remember the most is that at that time, the crime was so horrific in New York City that policemen armed wouldn't go into the park across from their precinct station because it was so dangerous.
Mm.
And being just stunned by that. I mean, it's one thing for one of us not to walk into the park when we know that there's crime. So I'll have to go back and look at that, because I really enjoyed the book. A couple comments. One is, it reminds me how important it is to read the book closer to when you have the conversation. I read it about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I had to go back and reread a summary today. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. She married Max, so what stayed with me was the walk and how really interesting the walk was. For me, the one unrealistic scene was the scene with the vandals, the hoodlums, whatever we want to call them. She's an 85-year-old woman. The rest of it I thought was believable, but I thought, really, she's going to just be so sweet and accepting and exchange her coat and it's all going to be fine. That was a stretch for me in terms of being able to believe it. But I do now want to go back and check out the publishing date of Bonfire of the Vanities, because New York became hideously unsafe.
Here's my phone.
And what no one wants to really acknowledge anymore, I don't think, is that the person who cleaned it up with very heavy-handed tactics was Rudy Giuliani, who most of us really are not, members of his fan club. But he started with subway graffiti and turned New York City around from a crime standpoint. So anyway, that's kind of an aside. Sorry.
Bonfire was 1990.
1990. I have 1987.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
80s.
We have a different
Maybe
Google site.
okay. Yes, you're right.
May have been.
Yeah, it was in the 80s. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Been a second printing or something.
Yeah. Well, on the hoodlums, the vandals trying to take from her and end up swapping coats, I kind of felt like that it almost was unbelievable, and anyone else, something else would have happened, but only something like this would happen to Lillian Boxfish, kind of thing.
So was that one of the things, I never heard her ask the question, was that one of the things that actually happened to Margaret Fishback?
I don't think so. I did watch an interview, and if I remember, I'll send it in the follow-up email on Friday, but the walking was the author's take.
Right.
Margaret Fishback, the real copywriter and poet, was not that much of a walker. And I think her health kind of got to her in her later years, so she probably wouldn't have been able to walk 10 miles.
Yeah.
But the author said, she loved this woman. She wanted to do something with it, but she wasn't quite sure she had a story and didn't want to just it to be a biography or a spewing of facts. And she's a walker. She lives in Chicago. The author, Kathleen Rooney. And so she kind of decided to tie that in and make that the way she told the story. So, but the real person, it's based on the real person. And in fact, a lot of I think they might have said this in the afterword, but a lot of the poems and things are actually Margaret
Right,
Fishback. I want to say the wrong fish here.
right, right. Yeah.
You know, I kind of felt like we were traveling through the last day of Lillian's life, that we were bearing witness to that as I was going along on her walk. And I would not have made it 10.4 miles, I have to say. But did anybody else have that same feeling that maybe this was going to be her last day?
Oh, yeah.
Well, close, a little bit. Yeah.
All of her haunts that were memorable to her, good or bad, in New York City.
Yeah.
a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what they say, your life passing in front of your
I
eyes.
can go along with that.
It really made me wish that I were better acquainted with those neighborhoods in New York City.
Mhm.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I kept going back to the map to see exactly
Right.
where she was.
Right, yeah.
I was constantly, thank goodness for that, so constantly tracing where she was, and went to New York quite a few times for business in the 90s and early 2000s, I guess, but what was always in the exact same place. I didn't walk 10.4 miles in the evening, for example. So I really thought, well, this might mean even more to someone who really familiar with New York, exactly where she
Sure.
was at any given point in her walk. I don't know, did anyone else think that?
Yeah.
We didn't get a mark with the audio.
Margaret Fishback died in 1985.
I'm sorry?
Margaret Fishback died in 1985. And that's when Lillian
Mhm.
is ending her walk.
Wow, that's an
So
interesting.
the author must have used that somehow.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I like the way she brought in through the walk, besides bringing in the salient facts of Margaret Fishback's life, I assume a lot of the marriage and whatever. She brought all these themes in, like the depression and mental health and friendship and love and marriage and betrayal and mistrust. And I like the way at the end, and this is something else they talked about at the end of the audio book in the discussion between the narrator and the author, that she's 85 years old. Okay, you're pretty much set by 85, and she's still finding things to change her mind about. She's changing her mind about Julia, what she thinks about Julia, that maybe she was really wrong about her motivations for wanting to be friends. And I thought that was very interesting for her to bring in.
Do
And she-
any
she-
of you
Go ahead.
do any of
ahead,
you know
Karen.
much, do any of you know much about the use of shock therapy? Because it's something I don't know that much about, and it appears that that's what got her out of her incredible funk, but I don't know much about it, so it's a question on my part.
Carol,
Yeah, you're muted, Carol.
I have to unmute.
Okay,
There you are.
I worked on a psychiatric unit for 25 years, and in the beginning, we had a doctor. Pardon?
Go ahead. We're just getting an
Go
extra.
ahead.
So anyway, there was a doctor that did shock treatments like every Tuesday and Thursday. So I saw a lot of them, and the patient usually lost their memory for quite a while, which eventually came back. And there were a lot of patients, particularly women, that would come back maybe once a year and need to have a series of additional shock treatments. But you know, they're anesthetized and then they get the shock and then they have a seizure.
Oh, yeah.
And from then on, they don't have a memory of a lot of things.
Is that an accepted thing in mental health now? Do they still do that kind of thing?
Yes, and it's much better now. I know two people who've
Right,
had it.
I
and
was-
they're much better.
I was shocked to find out that they still do that, but it's done in a different way. And I believe in some cases it can be highly effective.
Yeah, for a while.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting how she dealt with the mental health issues and how, you know, different parts of her walk, things were kind of alluded to, but we didn't really know until closer to the end what really happened and how she, you know, what happened with her. So that was kind of interesting.
The incident.
The incident, yes, yes.
She really
Elizabeth-
admitted she did this. I mean, it was a control issue with her. She really wanted to punish Max, but it didn't work.
Mhm.
It was sad. She really suffered from his infidelity and all of that. It was sad. She was really hurt, and how she came through, it's a miracle.
Yeah. So why do you think she fell so hard for Max in the first place? She seemed so against conventions and marriage and kids and.
You know, I don't remember it. I don't remember why she fell for him.
He was handsome, I think.
Chemistry.
Yeah.
But she dated other men, so I don't remember what it was about Max. And he's younger, what, 7 years younger, I think. Wasn't he?
I think so.
Yeah.
He appreciated her sense of humor, and I think that was part of it too.
Who knows why
Did
people
any-
fall in love?
Did anybody look up the original person, the original Margaret, and find out, did she write everything in rhyming verse? Like it appears a whole lot of what this one wrote was it all that same kind of stuff?
It was all her stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe every single thing she wrote was like that, but that was
But
her.
a whole lot,
Mhm,
whole lot,
mhm.
that's for sure. Which does put it in a time frame, because I don't
Right.
think that would be, you know, a current kind of thing that would be happening, I wouldn't
Right.
assume.
Mhm, mhm.
Right.
Didn't you
Some
love
of her little rhymes. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. Some of her little rhymes, in a way, reminded me of the other book, which is true, the prize winner of something Ohio,
Oh,
and all
Yeah.
the little the jingle things that she would send in and win
Right.
prizes.
Mhm, mhm.
Defiance, the prize winner of Defiance.
Defiance. Yes.
right. Right.
Did anyone else love the story about the Nabiscos?
About the Oreos? you
I
mean?
mean, the Oreos,
Yeah.
and it ends up in the Nabisco factory,
Yeah, with the
the
Oreos.
National Biscuit Factory.
Yeah.
If we were all meeting together, I'd have Oreos for all of you.
Oh, what-
Aw.
And
I
we'd
love
eat,
one.
and we'd eat them.
We
Well,
would.
it kind of made you want them, didn't it?
Yes.
So do you think
Yes.
that was just something fun the
Yeah.
author wanted to put in, or is there some sort of meaning or theme to these Oreos?
Mm.
Well, she
Well, I-
ruminates on the idea of why she ended up eating so many and connected it to the advertisement at the, you know, is she susceptible to these ads the way the young people and the TV interview, remember, were telling her how ads had changed, and she didn't want to think that these current ads were great, but then she's thinking, well, but I ate all those Oreos and how'd that happen? And yeah, so it's kind of interesting.
That interview was a distressing scene, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And didn't you love that she got up and walked out?
yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
loved it.
Loved it. Uh-huh.
Her whole, you know, speech at the end there of that interview that right before she got out, I thought was great. They probably didn't understand half the words she used.
I could see why she felt like they set a trap for her, of course. And
Yeah,
I maybe in part reacted because I think people can get to an age where all of a sudden they're made to feel obsolete
mhm.
or out of date. And here she had been such a,
Relevant.
not only relevant, but somebody who blazed a trail.
Trailblazer.
Yeah, well, thank you. And was highly successful and, really was proud of what she'd done. And then now she's treated in this interview like this little quaint old lady. And I'm glad she was angry and left. She was very interesting, I thought, as a
I
character.
thought so too. Is anyone here from Ohio? No. There's a one little part, and she mentioned, oh, Wendy, her friend Wendy, who is who invites her to the party. And Wendy is pretending to be married to her roommate because she doesn't want her family in Garrettsville, Ohio, to know that she's not married. And my mother's family were farmers from Garrettsville, Ohio. And it's this little tiny farming, it's barely existing anymore.
That's
And I
hysterical.
thought, I wonder how she pulled Garrettsville, Ohio into her story.
You'll
And
have to email her and ask her.
I should ask her. It was just when I saw it was just the strangest thing. I went, oh my gosh.
She must know somebody from there.
Well, I looked it up and there's a poet, somebody Hart. He was fairly famous and he grew up in Garrettsville and he was around the same time she was and he committed suicide.
Oh,
Crane Hart, was his name?
Hart Crane?
Stephen Hart.
Crane. Maybe that's
Stephen
it.
Hart Crane?
Hart
Yep.
Crane. So that's the only sort of connection I can find between, poets in terms of them both being poets and having mental health. But I thought it was so interesting. I think I will write to her and ask her.
Well, there you
I
go.
have all these things I have to look up. Stephen Hart.
And take notes while we're.
Speaking of Wendy, I like the scene where her one of her guests accosts her as soon as she walks in.
I
and
know.
referring to her as Nancy Reagan.
I love that.
Oh,
Can you see this as a movie with somebody like Meryl Streep playing the part? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
Or Helen Mirren, one of those.
Yeah, somebody like that
Helen
had
Mirren.
some real substance.
That could be good. That could be good.
It would be a good movie.
Does it make you want to take a big walk and talk to everybody you know?
Not
In the
New York.
Hardin County.
Your mask on.
I did take a similar walk in New Orleans late one night, and the next day everybody's like, "What are you doing? You're crazy. Why did you do that?" But I survived, thankfully. So we talked a little bit about the poetry and how it's kind of rhymey and sometimes kind of cute. But of course, the advertising and things she was writing is very different than what it was in the 80s, as she was seeing, or even now, especially. Would you consider advertising art? Would you
Not
consider it?
anymore.
Would you consider it poetry?
It could be.
Uh, I think it used to be more so back then in the 20s, 30s, 40s, because so much was hand done. You know, now there's so much technology involved and action, and it's not there were a lot of actual photographs and hand drawn things, and that it was very different look to it and feel to it. And I really, a lot of the ads, I don't get a lot of them even. I mean, there's, you know, the man who's part motorcycle and the thing, I still don't get that ad. My husband laughs at it every time. And,
I
you know,
think
stuff
it's an
like
art
that.
form, but it's always changing. You know,
Yeah,
it depends
don't-
on what age group they're trying to target.
I'm not the focus group anymore, Carol.
So I don't know, you know, I have, without going into, you know, how old everybody is and who can relate to what, when you think of advertising though, both my husband and I can hear a word or a jingle for products that don't even exist. They haven't existed in decades, and we still know the jingle. Like it can be for cigarettes, or it can be for dishwashing soap, or whatever, and they stick in your mind. And I wish I could think of some really great examples right now, but
I wonder where
you wonder where the yellow went when you used.
when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent.
from Cam's beer, from the land of sky blue waters. If I had a better voice, I'd sing it to you. I mean, these things are lodged in my brain, and I'm sure they're lodged in a lot of our brains. And the products don't even exist, so they really can get in. I'm sorry, Carol.
How about DUZ, DUZ, DUZ does everything. Remember that one?
No.
No.
Does everything.
Yeah.
Does everything.
You know, but I'm probably older than all of you.
And Burma Shave. Who's old enough to remember the Burma Shave
Yeah.
signs when you went down the highway?
We had those in Ohio.
I do.
My husband remembers them. He's a few years older than I am. He remembers the Burma Shave ad.
Did anyone ever see or play? There's a game called Advertising.
No.
It used to be one of my favorites. It's a board game, but the premise is you're trying to guess the products from these jingles.
Huh.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
I've never heard of that.
Wanting to buy a copy, and I couldn't find a copy. And of course, I went into Nelson's when they were still in Bailey's Harbor. And of course, they had a copy in the back room of this game.
Oh,
Do you have it,
that's
Tracy?
a wonderful story.
Okay, next winter, we're there.
Yeah.
Play.
Oh yeah, we'll have to start a board game club.
Tracy had one, right?
Mhm.
There was game night at Bailey's Harbor. Yeah.
We haven't been able to meet this year, but yeah, we'll bring it
And
back.
we're thinking about audio and TV and stuff, print advertising. I mean, the demise of newspapers and magazines, and I know they're still around, but they're not as big as they once were. So print advertising has changed so much.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But gosh, those jingles stayed with us, and many of them did rhyme. I wouldn't call them poetry.
Yeah.
But
You wouldn't call them art, would you? No.
they did rhyme, right?
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh.
So not too long before the pandemic hit, I went to a library conference, and I stayed in a hotel room, and one wall the wallpaper was like old advertisings. I'm not sure. Time.
What a riot.
I took some pictures. I'll try to send them in the email, but I swear I sat and read that wall. Like, it's
Sure.
and they were very detailed drawings and, you know, little stories or poems, and it was really kind of fascinating to see.
Well, just to walk through an antique mall, I mean, there are ads everywhere, you know, whether they're Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola or beers or cigarettes or whatever. Their antique stores are full of ads.
Right. Right. And look at the fruit crate artwork. I mean, that's considered artwork.
Funny.
What did you think of her office at Macy's and things that happened there? She was considered the highest paid woman in advertising, but she still was complaining that she wasn't equal to the men's pay.
I liked more her relationship with Olive.
Oh, poor Olive.
Poor Olive.
Yeah,
That
that's
was
great.
good.
I mean, the pay and the you know, the ideas of trying to balance motherhood and work. It's really sad that it's been, when was she there? The 20s, 30s?
30s, yeah.
Yeah.
Not
She
changed
was
a whole lot.
wait, she was kicked out as soon as she became obviously
She couldn't
pregnant.
work. Yeah, she could. Well, no, they did let her stay through her pregnancy, but she couldn't work while she had a baby, after she had a baby. Yeah. And I think that was, you know, a lot of that was the crux of her slide into unhappiness and mental health issues and not being able to be who she really was, you know, not being able to keep part of who she really was. That was taken away from her. Even though she was doing some things on the side, it wasn't the same as when she was working at Macy's. And I think she kind of got lost. And then that affected her relationship with her husband. And so then he went looking for somebody who was happier. And yeah.
Yeah, she was also menopausal at the time too.
She was what?
She was at the age where she was probably premenopausal too. So everything sort of coming, she had her baby late in life.
Oh.
So I think all of that, she was in her 40s when that all happened with her, late 40s when that all happened with her husband. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the stuff about the mental institution was pretty ghastly.
She's a real pain in the ass.
The Thorazine and all that. That was sort of my father went through all of that, severe depression and shock treatments and drugs, and we went through it right along with him. So, but around the same time in the book that she was supposed to be going through it.
Does anybody remember how old her son was around that time?
13.
Teens.
13.
Yeah.
I remember the chapter where he was supposed to be coming to visit, and she said very clearly she really wasn't sure she wanted him to. It was hard on a 13-year-old. He'd have to take the train from Manhattan by himself and yada yada.
Yeah.
I do think Kathleen Rooney is a really good writer, and I may be partial to her because she's from Chicago and she teaches at DePaul, but partly inspired by Lillian Boxfish and partly by reviews, I then read her more recent book, Cherami and Major Whittlesey. And it's very good. She's just different. Cherami is a pigeon, and every other chapter is the pigeon talking. and Major Whittlesey was a real person. He was really an officer in the British Army in World War I. And Cherami was a real pigeon, actually.
Oh, okay.
Cherami is actually stuffed in one of the museums on in Washington, D.C.
Goodness.
National History Museum. So it's just, she's different. You know, I feel as though she's not writing these current novels where honestly there's so many of them seem so interchangeable to me, you know, in terms of style. And so she is an interesting young woman, I think, in terms of her skills. my.
You guys may have talked about this already because I came in a little bit late because I couldn't find a Zoom link. But thank you, Casey, for getting that to me. By the way, it wasn't up on the library calendar website. There was no Zoom link. Oh, I sorry, I didn't mean to lay it at your door. Anyway, it's all fixed. So thank you. But you may have already talked about this, but the book is based on her research about a real person who really, yeah. So you probably already talked about that. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Well, and the author herself too is a poet.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I think that kind of shows in her writing too. Did anyone else kind of get that kind of a feeling?
What kind of feeling, Tracy?
Just that it really shows that the author herself is a poet as well.
Oh yeah, she is. She's written. Yeah, I was very impressed with her age, how extensive her vocabulary is, and she's obviously a very intelligent young lady.
Yeah. What I particularly liked was the dialogue that she's written, because Lillian Boxfish truly seems like a very witty person. In the dialogue, it's one thing to describe somebody and say, oh, she was very witty and she wrote well, but you really felt it. I really could believe it from her dialogue.
Well, the other thing she does so well is, here's a much younger woman and she's creating this dialogue of an 84-year-old who probably feels no different than she did when she was in her 30s. Right. I'm still 25, by the way, in my head.
Right.
Yeah, so that was really, I think, she kind of shows her talent for that kind of transition in ages in her writing.
I like the small little tidbit that she lies about her age.
Yeah, year.
I like 1 year, right?
Because she doesn't want to be born in the 1800s.
Only a year. Oh, right, by a year. Yes.
She doesn't want to say 1899.
Isn't that a riot?
1900s.
Very funny.
Yeah. Just
like Kathleen Rooney, well, maybe Kathleen Rooney isn't Irish. Maybe she's married to someone who's Irish, but that's a pretty Irish thing too. My grandmother was either born in 1881 or 1884, but who knows? Because she would never fess up. So
we've been pretty positive about this. Anything somebody didn't like?
When I first started reading it, I wasn't feeling very close to her. She seemed a little cocky and not very open to listening to other people's, views and lifestyles. But the more I read the book, and then the more I read about the real Margaret Fishback, I really got to like her. So
yeah, I feel
similarly.
Did anybody else listen to the audiobook? I listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, I did.
It was tricky. The audiobook was tricky because it's a monologue. This person, you can, when you read the book, you can forget it's a monologue because then there's some dialogue. And it was so odd to me because then the actress would try to take character voices and do the different voices or the accents, and it's not what this person who's writing a memoir would have done. And so it was kind of a hybrid of two different things, kind of put together, and it's more forgiving, I think, when you're reading it, but then when you're listening to the audiobook, it was just odd. And that was so off-putting at first. Is that somebody's telling you her memoir, she's not going to all of a sudden as an actress go into, she's supposed to be the woman herself reading, and then she's not going to go into the voices of these other characters. So that just seemed kind of odd to me, but would have been better maybe on the page. I don't know.
I thought the narrator did a good job though of, the word I could only use to describe it was sardonic.
Yes.
That-
She
that-
certainly
that's
had
how
that tone.
That's how she sounded through
Yes,
through the whole
absolutely.
thing. Very
Absolutely. But humble toward the end.
Oh.
I found that off-putting at first, like as Jane did. She was just too full of herself a little bit for me. But then she grew on me, and I became much more sympathetic toward her, by the end, especially after the last chapter with the confrontation with the mink coat.
Yeah,
And taking the jacket, and
with all the zippers.
yeah, and running into the limo driver that she'd seen earlier in the evening, it just,
It was a story.
yeah, it was a good, clearly manipulative on the part of the author, but it worked, it was good. It was good to have it bookended and finished up in a nice way. And I must admit, I did not read 2 chapters because at 5 o'clock I had 3 chapters left, so I skipped to the last chapter. So I missed the New Year's Eve party and ringing in. Was there anything really earth-shattering about chapters 22 and 23 that I missed?
Just the Oreos.
The Oreos.
At the New Year's Eve party, there were Oreos? Oh, she brought Oreos.
No, the New Year's Eve party was in a warehouse that used to be the National Biscuit Company warehouse where the Oreos were.
They made Oreos.
Oh, I thought she was going to a friend's house for the.
She did
They
too.
lived in a loft.
They lived in loft. Okay.
Oh,
Got it.
how rude that.
That's
first
great because the
man
first
was to
chapter
her
started
there.
out with the
It was pretty
Oreos, so
rude.
that was
Right.
a nice way to bookend it too. Yeah.
I also think sometimes our reaction to books is based on whatever else we've been reading or are about to read. So I think for me, there's been a lot of heavy, both fiction and nonfiction in my life. So I don't remember exactly where this was in the sequence, but I read The Vanishing Half, I read Cast, there were The Water Dancer. And so it was just, for me, so nice to read a book that didn't make me despondent. That's a little strong. I'm not really prone to despondency, but
Yeah.
it was like, oh, this is kind of pleasant. It's well written, and it's interesting, and I like the character, and so it just felt like a reprieve, frankly, from a lot of what I read.
I would call it charming without being smarmy, and
I think
I
that's
liked
exactly
it a lot
right.
for that.
Yeah.
So Janet, is her new book a similar in feel?
Well,
Kind of a nice, light, enjoyable.
I would call it light because it's happening in the trenches in World War I.
Oh.
And the pigeon is in fact a carrier pigeon, and
Oh.
Major Whittlesey is a real major. But it's just she's a good writer, and there's some humor in it. I mean, if a pigeon is talking, there's some humor, right? So
We hope there is.
yep,
She writes about journeys. She likes journeys.
And Major Whittlesey is a really positive role model kind of character, and I liked it. I think it's been really well regarded.
Different. Yeah.
Personally, I did like it. I don't know, Tracy, have you read reviews of Jeremy?
I've not, but from what I've seen of this author and what she's written, her subjects are all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like her writing style might be similar in each, but her topics are just everywhere, which I don't know. It's how her mind works. Maybe it's a sign of a good author. Yeah.
She's a researcher. It sounds like she researches something and enjoys that and learns and shares with us. That's great.
One of the things I liked, in especially in response to what Janet was just saying about how you bring other books that you're reading to what you're currently reading or what you've just experienced. I just read Deacon King Kong by James McBride, which is about a very different New York neighborhood, but you really come to see it as a neighborhood and appreciate it as an entity and see the people in their roles in very different, but I think one of the things that the walking did for me for this, even though it's 10 miles, it brought to life this section of New York that has been her life as a neighborhood, as an entity. And that's what I liked about the reappearing limo driver, and that she was walking to a friend's party. I just really felt it came to me that New York is a city of neighborhoods. And I felt that this one was one that came to life. But especially it brought it home with comparing it to Deacon King Kong, which is a totally different sort of a book about the high-rise ghettos and drug dealers, but you come to appreciate the neighborhood and what neighborhoods mean to people. And that you just don't get up and leave or go somewhere else and I thought the walking and the reoccurrence of people and the circling around the Nabisco warehouse and Oreos, it's a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood. It's her neighborhood.
Sylvia?
James McBride is the one who wrote The Color of Water, right?
Oh, sorry.
I think
Yeah.
so. And
No.
The Good Lord Bird he wrote.
I thought
I think he did write The Color of Water. I think he did write that.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the autobiographical
Right.
one. Yeah.
When he was a boy, and his mother.
And his mother, when he kept asking what color they were, she would say the color of water.
So if the author were here, or if Jane emails her, any questions you would ask her?
Oh, I have one. I
Go
want to
ahead.
know that dinner or lunch at Delmonico's after the finalizing of the divorce, and then bringing it back, to go to Delmonico's on New Year's Eve as a mulligan, a do-over, because that was the phrase he used. His life was going to be a do-over with this new woman. I want to know at 30 years old or however old she was, how did she know that to make that so authentic? That conversation was so painful and so sharp-tongued, both of them. I just know, I'd want to know how she dredged that out of her experience in life. I'd want to ask her that. Where was she a fly on the wall to hear that conversation?
I don't know, but partly I think she had been granted access to all the private letters of Miss Fishbach.
Sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so maybe she got some of that from there. I don't know, but I'm just kind of guessing.
Yeah, but it was so intimate and so real.
She spent 10 years researching this for this book. I mean, she had access to the documents in 2007. The book was published in 2017.
Oh.
Duke University, is that right?
Yeah, the Fuqua School.
Yeah.
Right. That's
Well,
right.
I am going to ask her about Garrettsville, Ohio. I think that'd be fun. I hope she writes back.
Let us know.
I will.
I liked her friend Helen. That was her one real friend, I think. Everybody else wanted something from her, or was part of the social kind of scene. But Helen was really her friend and colleague, and she came to see her. She in the sanatorium, I should say, and then and said that meeting with her was more beneficial than meeting with all the psychiatrists. But that was very touching.
I would love to have had dinner with Lillian. Wouldn't it be fun to spend an evening with her and just, or sit out on the deck on a summer evening, with a little drink and just, I just found her an interesting person to listen to and to get to know. I would have liked to have spent some time with her.
I agree.
What did you guys think of her retelling of her last TV interview with the panel that she was on, and how, you know, they just were, it was so typical of American journalism or a talk show kind of thing where
We thought she ended it really well.
yeah, and then in the end she gets up and leaves right in the middle of the broadcast. Yeah.
Well, I think that's when she brings up the quote of it is solved by walking. And sometimes that means walking out. And that seemed like it was a good idea for her to walk out of there and not tolerate them.
Did anybody have any favorite parts? You've probably already done this because I came in 25 minutes late, so you already said all that. So sorry.
Well, tell us yours.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have already. The Delmonico scene I thought was just remarkably well written, and the way it was bookended, you know, with certain little things, you know, were like the Oreos. And they were such an important part of that very first chapter of how she had absentmindedly eaten a whole thing of Oreos. And then, you know, it was in that factory. And I don't know, little things like that, I think I enjoyed very much.
And then she ended up having then a good memory of Delmonico's. Wasn't that where the family?
Oh yeah, that was charming. Wasn't that
Join
charming?
them. So that
Girl.
was a closing of a circle there.
Yeah, the little girl, little girl Penny, I think her name was, and she said something so sweet to her. She said, I think you'd like my granddaughter. She said, well, I will if she's anything like you. You know, or if she's like you. I will. That was such a sweet thing to say. You know, from a 10-year-old. You know, it was great.
You know, one thing that I think is nice too is that this woman was a woman of means, and she would pull out the money at the right place and make it work for her and make it benefit somebody else. And I thought how nice that she could do that. That was a good thing.
Yeah. Good point.
Any other thoughts before we start wrapping up here? These hours go fast.
I think I'd like to read her next book.
Would you?
I think so. Yeah.
What's the book for?
This, before I get to that, is this something you would recommend to others?
Sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Highly.
Positive experience.
Yep.
You know, the other thing, Tracy, is that we're all of an age where we can really hold on to that way more than I bet you can. Well, but there's relevancy here for many of us. So yeah.
Well, one thing I may not have told you was that for a time I was a copywriter and would write advertising copy.
Oh, wow. And did you feel like an artist?
Not most days. But it was interesting because we were trying to read poetry, and just to kind of keep inputting good poetry to kind of just
that's interesting.
a little bit. So I did find the connections there kind of interesting.
Did yours rhyme?
Not usually, no.
Oh.
You were a haiku girl, I bet.
Ooh.
And I'm cursing you all for reminding me about advertising songs, because all of I can got this earworm now for plop plop fizz fizz or whatever. One that came to mind and now I can't get rid of it. Tracy, what product was that?
Alka-Seltzer.
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 That one I know.
Oh, man.
Now there's so much on TikTok. My son, he knows all of these like popular songs, but only like 12 seconds of them. They're all just short little things. Any other thoughts on Lillian Boxfish? Maybe we're sad to see her go. Sounds like we kind of liked her.
I love the name, the choice of the name. Fishback Boxfish. I just think it's a great little turnaround on the name.
Yeah, we talked early on how it seemed kind of a strange name until you realize it was a take on Fishback.
Right.
Well, next month we will meet June 2nd. And for the gown, get the glare out of there.
And that's about what?
This is about women that work at an embroiderer's in, is it in London?
Yes.
Yes,
I
it
finished it this morning. Yeah.
did.
It was good. It was quite good.
I've read it already. I think it's good. Yeah, and they end up working on Queen Elizabeth's wedding gown.
Yeah.
So
That's June 3rd, did you say?
June
June
2nd.
2nd.
Second.
Wednesday, June 2nd. Hard to believe we're heading into summer, but it's
Oh
coming.
my gosh.
And will this book group continue to be virtual, or will you start meeting together outside, or what, have you decided?
We will continue to meet virtual for now. The decision rests with the library, not with me. So
Okay.
it may be possible to meet outside later in the summer, but I can't really say for sure at this point. It has been requested, and I think we will continue to have virtual as an option. So even when we're in person, if
People can,
in town or just doesn't feel like coming
That
in.
was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Whether there'll be a
Great.
hybrid, because sometimes I'm there and sometimes I'm not. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, that would be lovely if we could do that. I have a question. What was it going to be? Oh, well, think of it. Oh, I know. How if the I tried to join the Facebook group because you obviously sent the link to all of these people because it wasn't on the website. So I tried to join that group so at least I would get it that way.
Yeah,
The
you
Facebook
can.
group.
Yeah, and if you'd like to be on the
think
email
so.
list
I
too,
think
I
so.
saw you emailed me earlier. So just if you want, I can add your email to that list too.
Oh, that would be great. Put me on the email list because then if inadvertently it doesn't get up on the Door County calendar website, then I'll have access to it some other way.
That'll be good.
Mhm,
Thank
mhm.
you.
And if anyone else isn't on the email list and wants to be, just let me know or send me an email to remind me.
Okay.
Right. Thank
Over
you.
and out.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thanks, Tracy.
Tracy.
Good talk.
You.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Great
Bye.
group. Really great group. Bye.